Good morning, it's Monday, which means it's time for a quick take. And over the weekend, everything was about Bitcoin Miami. We will get to that in a bit. But I wanted to tackle this week some things that I noticed happening in the market. There have been a lot of responses to things, and we're going to cover a few of them here. So somebody said something, somebody else has responded, and it sort of provoked a lot of debate and discussion, and it's kind of interesting stuff. So we're going to start with Anonymous, who posted a video in response to Elon Musk. And as we know, Elon has become both the pariah and the savior of crypto in the last 6 months or so. And with every tweet, the market goes up or it goes down. And it has often felt like he's just doing it for fun, just doing it because he can and just doing it to see what happens if he does. And Anonymous, if you remember, they are a hacker group who post videos about Illuminati, about conspiracy theories, but they have a lot of reach and they have a lot of followers. And they posted a video specifically attacking Elon Musk. In particular, they accused him of buggering up the lives of retail fish and of being a little more than a Bond villain. Now, the video has over 2 million views already. They take issue with his environmental record. They say that it was now widely believed you've been forced to denounce your company's involvement with Bitcoin in order to keep the green government money flowing into Tesla's coffers. So they're accusing Elon of basically leveraging his position as a green manufacturer to get favorable subsidies from the government, and that this association with Bitcoin was going to jeopardize that. Now, the sentence about retail investors is really interesting. It says millions of retail investors were really counting on their crypto gains to improve their lives. As hardworking people have their dreams liquidated over your public temper tantrums, you continue to mock them with memes from one of your $1 million mansions. So they're accusing Elon of being a rich billionaire, which he is. I don't know how you can be a billionaire and not be rich, by the way, and of not really giving a shit about retail investors. Retail investors have made a ton of money off Doge and by extension Shiba Inu, and yeah, you can, as a retail investor, exercise a certain amount of caution in your positioning, but there is no doubt that there is a sense of responsibility inherent in the position of somebody like Elon Musk, and perhaps he's abusing his power. Elon hasn't actually responded officially to this video yet, and I wouldn't expect him to, but he did post a kind of cryptic tweet, which was, "Don't kill what you hate, save what you love." And who knows what that means? But there's no doubt that the market is enthralled to Elon's every tweet at the moment, and it has an unbelievable bearing on the market. Now, if I remember back in 2017, it was John McAfee. John McAfee had an inordinate amount of influence on the market. Now it's Elon. Elon's a much bigger figure. And with everything that happened with him, Michael Saylor, and the supposed Bitcoin mining agreement, who knows where Elon stands on all of this. Now, the next response I want to get into is Tom Borgers, who is the CEO of Consensus, and Consensus are hugely influential in the outreach of the Ethereum network, the Ethereum ecosystem, and have done a huge amount of work to build that out. They probably took a huge hit around 2018. In fact, I know they did, but they're slowly building back up and have done a huge amount to build infrastructure and help spread the word of what Ethereum's all about. So, hugely influential people. And Tom wrote a very long and quite well-considered Medium post in response to Joe Weisenthal, who's the host of the Odd Lots podcast, which is about finance and traditional financial markets. So Joe wrote a tweet which said, it's possible that I'm too stupid to get DeFi and Ethereum. Bitcoin, I get. It's money. And people hold it, and sometimes they even spend it. Tokenomics, Web 3.0, DAOs, it just goes over my head. That's cool. We'll keep trying to learn, though. So Joe is clearly a DeFi skeptic, and as a channel that's DeFi positive, it's good to listen to what people like Joe have to say because they have an enormous amount of influence. And if they start to get it and start to understand it, then obviously that advocacy will do a huge amount for the space in general. So Tom wrote a long and highly considered article talking about some of the real economy use cases of DeFi, and he talks about what's possible now, some of the innovation that's happening, and of course, where we are going. So he made 3 main points. First, he says, remember, it's really, really early in terms of the development of this technology and the space at large. And he makes the difference between the courtesy that Joe pays to the Bitcoin crowd compared to the cuts he might pay to the DeFi crowd. So again, yes, we know we're early in this phase. Second, he says, I think there's an important distinction to make between the parts of DeFi that recreate much of the traditional financial system, but better, on the one hand, and the brand new financial innovation that's happening in DeFi. So you imagine lending and borrowing, that's sort of remaking the traditional financial system, but then you get something like Alchemist, which he references, where you have a loan that can repay itself, and that is genuine innovation. And then the final point he says, which is kind of interesting, I must ask for a bit of imagination. I know you're certainly not stupid, but I do think you're being stubbornly unimaginative when it comes to DeFi. So I guess what Tom is saying here is, allow us to experiment, allow us to get things wrong, because in that experimentation and in that bold creativity will come things that we would never have imagined possible. And so he's saying to Joe, exercise some imagination. Be that person who's brave enough to go there. But of course, you know, the history of technology and innovation is littered with so-called visionaries and innovators whose imagination far outpaced their ability to deliver either a product or a service or anything really. Now there's one final note from Tom where he wraps it all up and he says, remember this, the core benefits remain disintermediation, which should still exist in more regulated environments, composability, and transparency. I highly recommend you read this. It's a great kind of slightly nuanced take on DeFi and a reminder that, you know, for all that we think we've made progress, there's still a huge way to go. Now, the final response I want to look at here is actually not a response at all, it's the lack of a response. And it is to, well, it's Holaswap. Holaswap exists on Binance Smart Chain. And right up front, Holaswap will tell you that they are 100% a fork of Uniswap version 3 on BSC that is 100% community owned and governed. Do you see what the problem with this is? Yes, absolutely. The problem with this is that Uniswap version 3 is not technology that you can legally fork, not in its entirety anyway. That has been very clear in all the messaging that's come out, and there is a license. You can't just fork Uniswap version 3, at least not for 2 years, and expect to get away with it. What's interesting is there has been no response to this yet from Hayden and the team. And just by some stroke of weird coincidence, if you go and look at who's actually registered this and where they're registered, I kid you not, the administrative street listed is Hayden Road. You can't make this up. So it's going to be interesting to see how Hayden and the team, because I'm presuming that he's got a fantastic team of lawyers, how they respond to this, because it's blatant. They have straight up said, we have forked Uniswap version 3. What I find fascinating about this is there's an audit report listed, and you can link to it. It's a report by ABDK. It's not an audit of Holaswap, it's an audit of Uniswap version 3. So they're linking to an audit of the core code. They have not done anything to the core code at all. It's exactly the same. And I went through that audit report, and there's like 4 pages worth of minor issues that they found with Uniswap. So I was curious what those issues were and how they would affect Uniswap version 3. So that was an insight that I hadn't had before. But yeah, I am waiting with bated breath to see what the Uniswap team is going to say. And by way of conclusion, I promised we would come back to Bitcoin Miami, and we will, to this zinger from Eric Voorhees in response to something that was said in one of the panels. Eric said it best. I will see you on the next one. Peace!
Before we begin, did I hear someone in that prior panel say, if you're against toxic maximalism, you are against Bitcoin and you're against freedom? Yeah, that's some bullshit.